Welcome to the first episode of the Suspension Secrets Workshop series. In this series, we're going to be taking a closer look at some of the more interesting builds that come through the workshop. We're also going to be taking a more technical look at some of the aspects of those builds.
The first car we're going to look at is the Lancia Delta Rally that you can see behind us. It's been brought to us by Cage Steel Motorsport to be turned into a competitive hill climb car. The Lancia Delta dominated rally in the late 80s and early 90s, winning 6 consecutive World Rally Championships, a record yet to be beaten, earning the Delta iconic status. This specific example is a 1989 model, produced for the road and later converted to rally spec. It's been brought to us by Cage Steel Motorsport, who want to use it for competition in 2021. The 16-valve 2-litre engine is out and off for a rebuild, and the bodywork has also received some attention. The next step is to strip the rest of the car for some rust repairs before putting it all back together and getting it back running. So join us over the next few weeks as we rebuild this Delta and make it competition ready.
This car started life as a road car and at some point in its lifespan has been turned into a competitive rally car. We're now going to tweak that to make it a hill climb car. It's been upgraded to the Integrale Evo front suspension, so you've got the caster adjustment and you've got wheelbase adjustment in that as well. It's also got a wider track width as standard. We're going to remove this brake servo system that's had the mass cylinders put on with a balance bar. We're going to put a pedal box inside the car, and that's going to increase the feel for the driver on the brakes when we add the big brake kit to the car. The front sump guard mounts have also taken some impact at some point. They're a bit worse for wear, so what we're going to do is refabricate these, square them up, and just make them a bit neater in general. The floor pan, the wheel arches, and the engine bay of the car are all showing signs of surface rust. It's all starting to come through. Nothing special for a Lancia, more than common, but it's at a point now where we can stop that happening and we can strip it all back and we can repaint that, protect it from rust, and it'll be good for the lifespan of the car then. Whereas if we leave this now and just paint over that, it'll just come through and get worse as the years go on. The rear suspension mounts, they've taken some impact as well. Probably when it's just been off-road at some point and it's taken a hit. We're going to fabricate some skid plates off this, which is quite common in the rally world, so that if we take a hit again, it's going to skid off over the mount and off behind the car, rather than taking direct impact on that mount there. Got the rear suspension here with the Evo suspension mounted at the back. Got the rear diff carrier, and again, signs of surface rust all around the back here too. At the very back of the car, it looks like it's been towed out of a ditch or something along those lines. It's been towed with some force, and it's twisted the whole rear chassis member here, and it's actually completely twisted the metal. So the best way to get that back and get the shape back again and get the tow hook back to the correct location is to cut the box out and put a brand new piece of box section in, and that's going to tidy the whole car back up, make it stronger, and we're going to brace that back into the chassis. So if it ever is towed again, it's going to pull on the chassis, triangulated instead, and it's not going to bend the rear section of the car. So the next stage of this build is we need to drop all the suspension off the car. We need to clear the engine bay out so we can get to every single piece of metal on the floor pan, wheel arches, and engine bay, so we can strip that right back and we can get to protecting it from rust and fully repainting the underside of this car.
Although it wasn't something we had planned on having to do, stripping the car back ready for rust repairs is an excellent opportunity for us to take a closer look at the components of the car. We don't know much about the history of the car, or when indeed it was converted to rally spec, so this closer look will allow us to check that everything has been done properly and everything is working as it should. The Delta is over 30 years old and is likely to have had many parts replaced over those years. So as well as checking these parts are damaged, we'll also need to check that they're correct for the car.
So we've got the wrong style of bolt through these drive shafts altogether. We've got the hex heads in, which means you can't actually turn the bolt once you're tightening it up, so we need to exchange these for cap heads for a start. So we'll get all these out and we'll replace them when we're putting it back together.
A big part of the Delta's rally success was down to its handling. So as we put the car back together, we're going to take a closer look at what made it handle so well, breaking down the suspension secrets that made this possible. The suspension is a critical part of rally car design. The ability to travel fast over a variety of surfaces is a challenging problem that can be approached in a number of ways. The Group A class, which the Delta competed in, forbids radical suspension modifications. So we'll be looking at what suspension modifications can be made to a standard car to improve its handling.
So one problem that we can address before we go any further is these riv nuts that have been put in to support the anti-roll bar. So these have already started pulling out just by unbolting the roll bar. So as soon as that starts taking any load around the corner, then it's going to pop out the chassis and the roll bar has a high chance of just falling off the car. So we're going to drill these out and we're going to weld on a plate with nuts welded to the back, so it's a bit more substantial and provides a much stronger contact point for the roll bar mounts.
Discovering issues like these roll bar mounts and making stripping the car back even more worthwhile. From looking at it, it wasn't obvious at all that the roll bar had been fitted incorrectly. It was only by taking it off the car that potential disaster was averted, and it can now be properly mounted to the car. It's also a good way for us to become more familiar with the car, for when the Delta is competing and it does develop issues, that these issues can be quickly diagnosed and repaired. With seized bolts and similar issues encountered now in the workshop, rather than later on an expensive race weekend.
So now we've got the full underside stripped off in all four corners, it's time to turn our attention to the engine bay. In here we've got a lot going on, a lot of wiring, plumbing, steering rack still needs to come off, the brake servo, and then we need to find the route of all the wiring harness and pull that back through into the cabin so we can fully prep the engine bay for paint. As you can see in this engine bay, it's quite messy as it is. That's before an engine and gearbox have even gone in. First thing we're going to look at to tidy all this up is to remove this brake servo master cylinders. We're going to get rid of that whole assembly and we're going to mount a pedal box inside the car instead. Move the master cylinders into the car, and that's going to give us a lot more space to work on and a lot more space inside the engine bay.
Removing everything from the engine bay was a very time-consuming task, but once again proved very worthwhile. The car had recently had a new engine wiring harness fitted, which appeared to be in good condition and well made. The rest of the wiring, however, was not. It appeared to be the original wiring loom that had been cut, chopped and adapted over the lifetime of the car and now had many loose connections and inadequate earths. So to avoid future issues, we're going to remove this loom and replace it with a brand new one. With the underside stripped, we can see clearer the areas that need some attention, so we're going to use the wire wheel and get it ready for some welding. After starting the welding prep, and with so much to do, we soon realised it would be much easier if we just put the car on the spit. We had Alan Crossley down to do the welding, so before he got to work, he first made up some mounts so we could mount the car on the spit. The spit making it much easier to work on, allowing us to rotate the car so it is in a more comfortable position. The easy access making it much easier to do a good job, and also making life simpler for the paint guys later on. With a plan for the welding put together, Alan got to work, but soon encountered an issue with the car. The chassis rails had been filled with expanding foam. This could have been done for a number of reasons, but the reality is that it traps water in the rails and makes them rust from the inside out. So as much as possible of the expanding foam needs to be removed. The welding repairs will give parts of the car some much needed strength. As soon as Alan is finished with the car, it'll be straight off to paint, ready for the next episode where we start to put the car back together. Let us know in the comments what you think of the Lancia Delta, and what you'd like to see more of in the rest of the series. And also, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode of the Suspension Secrets Lancia Delta build.